Warhammer 40,000 is pretty confusing. If you're like me and have never played a Warhammer game, the universe can feel downright daunting. There's literally dozens of games spanning everything from CRPGs to boomer shooters, so even knowing where to start can be quite the tricky task. However, I think I and many others saw the insane hype surrounding Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 last year, and honestly, it looked like a game right up my alley. Well, earlier this month I finally sat down and played the game from start to finish, and wow, is it absolutely phenomenal. Today, I wanted to discuss why you should play Space Marine 2 in 2025 by discussing the game's presentation, its gameplay, and its story, of course without any spoilers. Also, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider subbing to the channel and dropping a like, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Right from the get-go, Space Marine 2 isn't messing around. You're straight away launched from a ship into a gritty and dark battlefield that is just full of atmosphere. The game doesn't put any effort into easing you in, but it throws you into the chaos, and the presentation of the game wholeheartedly contributes to the spectacle of it all. The universe of Warhammer 40,000 is apparently known for its grim and over-the-top scale, and this game absolutely nails that aesthetic and feel in every single way. Even in the very first mission of the game, you can feel the weight on your shoulders as a super soldier who's expected to survive against the likes of thousands of vicious creatures all vying for your head. And impressively, Space Marine 2 keeps up this grit and scale from beginning to end. Whether you're fighting on sprawling industrial battlefields or marching through gothic-like fortresses, every location in this game feels otherworldly and fantastical in the best of ways. The game's graphical fidelity also plays a big part in this, as honestly this is one of the best looking games I have ever played, much of which is due to the intricate visual design overlaying it all. From the power armor you wear to the guns and swords that you wield, everything in this game feels like it was handcrafted with weight and detail. The game's enemy designs also follow this trend as they genuinely look imposing and intimidating, which adds to the tension of every encounter in the game. Every creature and person in this game looks like it actually belongs in this universe, and that's from the smallest grunt to the towering monstrosities which you'll wrestle with as you progress through the game. It's the sort of art direction that'll see you pausing in the midst of your carnage as you stand and gaze at the mesmerizing world around you. But Space Marine 2's visuals only tell half the story of its presentational value, as I personally think the sound design in the game deserves just as much praise. From every bolt that you fire feeling like it's tearing through the air with great force, to the chainswords that roar with anger, all the game's sound bites seethe with a sort of impact that most games don't have. Now combine that with the game's outstanding soundtrack that swings between pulse-pounding orchestral intensity and ominous grandeur, and you get a game that truly sounds just as epic as it looks. Of course, what you're all interested in more than the game's fantastic presentational value is the gameplay that's stringing everything together. At its very heart, Space Marine 2 is a power fantasy of a genetically engineered super soldier, but it's not one that'll let you mindlessly wade through enemies without a single thought. Now, I won't act like it's exactly complex by any means, but that's kind of the whole idea here. The core combat loop of Space Marine 2 perfectly blends ranged gunplay with brutal and visceral melee encounters, creating a rhythm that constantly shifts between mercilessly gunning down your enemies to plunging headfirst into the chaos with a raging chainsword. It's the sort of game that understands that your every attack and action should carry weight. Weapons in this game feel heavy and devastating, with every trigger pull having this sort of thunderous impact, and every melee swing feels like you're truly cleaving through enemies' flesh. The beauty of the gameplay in Space Marine 2, however, is how it forces you to switch between this rhythm constantly. Your ammunition isn't infinite, and while you've got an arsenal of weapons to choose from and ammunition to find in almost any location in the game, it constantly encourages you to close the distance, and it's in these instances where the game truly shined for me. The brutal executions you undertake while clawing your way through enemies with your melee attacks not only serve as a way to heal you, but make for some of the most stylish clashes in the entire game. This combat loop creates a flow that really feels aggressive and punchy, as you're not just cowering behind cover waiting to find a health pack, but you're charging into the middle of the chaos to earn your keep back. Furthermore, the game's enemy variety definitely adds to helping keep this loop from ever going completely stale. And now I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Space Marine 2 has incredible enemy variety, but for a game that's only 8 to 10 hours for its main campaign, the enemy variety feels just right. It's got its fair mix of smaller and more agile foes forcing you to divide your attention against their swarms, to hulking monstrosities that require every bit of your attention and will chew through your health in seconds if you're not careful. The game is great at constantly throwing different combinations of enemies at you, making you always shift between prioritizing targets, managing your position, and deciding whether to stand your ground or barrel forward. But what I think is one of the most impressive elements of Space Marine 2's gameplay is the way in which it handles the scale of its battles. For the most part, it's not a game where you fight a handful of enemies at a time, but you're often put in front of hundreds swarming at you in chaotic, screen-filling hordes. Yet personally, none of this ever felt overwhelming in an annoying way, as you can still pick out the threats ahead of you and still feel the satisfying thump of a well-placed shot amidst all of the madness. I think it's also important to note that the game's boss fights also add to the overall chaos of the combat in the game. There's not too many of them, but when you do see yourself in one, they truly crank up the spectacle in mixing up environmental hazards, semi-unique attack patterns, and sheer scale that makes them truly feel major and impactful. Moving on, the game's movement is also great as it feels tight and responsive without losing the grounded and tank-like feel of a Space Marine. You can't just zip around like a lightweight action protagonist, but you're an armored juggernaut whose every sprint, dodge, and leap reinforces that sense of controlled power. Even the game's numerous platforming and traversal moments carry the same way, and of course help break up the game's combat encounters without feeling like filler. With all of that said, I think what's most important in terms of making any game's gameplay truly great is the mission design of the game itself. Now, Space Marine 2's mission design does quite a great job of mixing up the types of scenarios that you see yourself in throughout its relatively short runtime. It's fairly easy to categorize the game as a complete slashing and shooting fest, but the small nuances in combat encounters and the context of the battles itself keep the gameplay consistently engaging. Where one mission might see you holding the line against overwhelming waves in a desperate siege, another will drop you into a massive all-out offensive with ships and tanks littered across the battlefield as you valiantly push through. Even beyond the more open-ended combat encounters, the game also has numerous more claustrophobic encounters set inside fortresses or other closed areas that force you to fight up close and personal with no room for error. To me, it's the game's constant switching between these normal encounters, close space encounters, and the big scripted set pieces that allows the gameplay to feel constantly fresh without ever overstaying its welcome in your playthrough. Now to discuss the story of the game, I of course can't say too much as there will be no spoilers here, but honestly I don't have too much to say anyway. Space Marine 2 isn't exactly a deep, branching narrative experience where your choices matter, but it's more of a blockbuster style campaign that's there to keep you moving between different battles and give you context to the chaos that you're unleashing. Of course, everything I say is from the perspective of someone who knows literally nothing about the larger lore or universe of Warhammer, so there might be something that I'm missing, but even as it stands, I personally think the game story does just enough to keep you engaged, and for me, it even made me interested into looking into more games with more lore of the universe, like Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader. Now, coming back to the point, Space Marine 2's story keeps it simple while still having enough substance to draw you into being interested in its characters and the larger hierarchy of the world around you. The story is definitely over the top and leans into a sort of interesting grim tone that's perfect at not bogging you down in endless exposition, while still giving you just the pieces you need to understand what's going on. The scale of the universe is felt greatly through the story, mainly through the game's various set-piece moments, but even these are brushed with just enough character moments and dramatic story beats to keep things fresh and interesting. The pacing of it all is tight, and the stakes of every mission and objective is clear, and it never feels like the game is dragging you away from the blood-pumping action for the sake of dumping you with some lore. I'd also like to note that even beyond the main campaign, the game does have a few extra sort of complementary missions that go alongside the main story. These missions, known as operations, will often see you playing as Marines or characters that are completing objectives at the same time of a particular mission. For example, if a main story mission has you leading an all-out assault on a besieged enemy fortress, the operations mission will see you looking to create a distraction for yourself in the actual main mission. These missions are great for the purpose of adding some extra context to the game's main campaign, and are also just generally quite fun to play through. Overall, although Space Marine 2's story is not exactly one you'll be remembering greatly after rolling the credits, it's perfect as a backdrop for the kind of relentless and spectacle-driven gameplay that Space Marine 2 is wholeheartedly built on. All in all, Space Marine 2 is an absolutely incredible game that to me harkens back to one of the golden ages in gaming, where games like Halo had the perfect mix of gameplay, story, and replayability to make them gems in the industry. To me, Space Marine 2 really feels like a game from the 360 era of games, and I really mean that in the best of ways. It's a game that actually respects your time, and with its numerous set pieces and brutal and engaging gameplay, it kept me constantly glued to my screen throughout my entire playthrough. I highly recommend all of you to pick it up, even if you have little interest in these sorts of games, and it often goes on sale for just $25, which I think is a great price for what you get. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. If you enjoyed, please consider subbing to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.